Pineal Stories is intended for information and educational purposes only. The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. We aim to raise awareness and foster thoughtful discussion around symptomatic pineal cysts. We are not providing medical guidance or diagnosis. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical concerns or decisions. Every individual situation is unique, and only your doctor can help you determine the best course of action for your health. We originally recorded this in November of 2024. The intent was just to put it out there so that one, people who were going through something similar would know they weren't alone, and two, to get this in front of the medical community by any means necessary, because the standard that we kept running into time and again was, well, it's not going to kill you, so we're not going to operate on it. And absolutely nobody would want a brain surgeon to do surgery without justification. Nobody's asking for that. But what we are hoping for is to shift a little bit the perception of what is necessary, because these stories are coming from all around the world. And these horrific things are happening to families, and these people are being told time and again, well, it's not going to kill you. Let's wait and see. Let's monitor. Let's do an MRI every 6 months. And I get that's the standard, and that's the way things have been. But we are incredibly fortunate that there are some surgeons who are treating this, who are willing to listen to the entirety of the story, and who recognize that there's more to it than just breathing. If the standard is that person is going to continue breathing so we don't do it, well, okay, but that standard needs to change. We are desperately trying to get people to understand what it's like for a family to go through this. Someone with a brain malady that is not the person that you know. My wife was not there for this. Most of the time, for the 3 years during which she suffered with this, my wife was not there. It was an entirely different person. It took a huge toll on our family, and we are eternally grateful that she eventually found the right surgeon and that he did the surgery, knowing that these things were in fact caused by a cystic enlargement of the pineal gland. That's it. They're taught that there are these other things that, well, no, you have to go to psychiatry. It may be cancer. It may be this or that. My wife went through a lot besides this. But it was this surgery that brought her back to us. She was a different person for 3 years. She had the surgery, and day by day after that surgery, more of my wife came back. A year later, almost to the day, a year later, I had my wife back. I hope that the tumor boards and that the surgeons will take these stories, not just from my wife and I, but from all over the world, and really consider people's lives. All right, November 2024. Here we go. Hi, my name's Michael Abels, and I'm with my wife, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And this is a horror story. In 2019, my wife started having some episodes, is what we decided to call them, where things didn't quite seem right to her. At the same time, the world was becoming aware of a health threat. And then early 2020, we all know we went on lockdown. And as we went on lockdown, and some of us put on weight, my wife was incredibly lucky and went the other direction. She was trimming down, and I was just amazed. I do some comedy writing. I've done some stand-up and that sort of stuff. Mostly I'm a voice actor, but I've done some things in comedy. And so I actually wrote a few skits, bits, I should say, that kind of went along those lines of how my wife is losing weight through all this, and I'm spreading out like a pat of butter on hot toast. There was a reason.
Yes. So at first, when I first started losing weight, I was excited. I was super happy that most women over 40, how difficult it is to lose weight. I wasn't really trying, but it was something I needed to do. So it wasn't really a concern at the beginning. But yeah, probably around the start of when all the schools shut down and we were all home for a while, I started experiencing not just weight loss, but headaches and nausea. And so I started looking for a doctor. And I went to a few different doctors in Stephenville, which is where we are. Pretty much everyone told me, you're fine, you're healthy, there's nothing wrong with you. And then one day, I'll never forget this day, I was driving home from work. I work for the census, and I'm driving home, and I called my husband because I suddenly felt like I was dying. I thought that I was having a heart attack. I thought something was terribly wrong. And of course, you're supposed to pull over and call 911. And I just said, meet me at the hospital. And then I ended up getting home. And then it happened again a couple of days later. And then we did go to the emergency room. But they didn't really do any tests. They just said, you're having a panic attack and you're fine. So
it's been difficult to find doctors, and I'm sorry, we're not really treating this like like when we do voice work. You will hear background noises. We're both sitting down. We're being very casual about this because it's not going to be easy. So that is just the nature of this recording. But anyway, we knew there was a problem, and I was in the room when a medical professional, I'm air quoting, told my wife, honey, you're too young and hot to have any real problems. So that was that for the doctors of Stephenville, Texas. I went looking for someone else. And I was insistent that we find a female doctor who would actually listen. Who I found was a female doctor in Cleburne, Texas. We're not going to mention her name because of some stuff that we'll tell you later. But she was the first one to say, well, maybe there's an actual problem. We should look into it. And she sent us for an MRI of Kelly's brain. While we were waiting for that appointment, Kelly was having eye problems. And we went to an eye doctor here in Stephenville. Female, not that it matters in this, maybe it does, I don't know. But a female doctor who was very concerned and actually did some looking and found bleeding, retinal bleeding, but said that, it could be transient, so come back. So we have that on our plate, and we go to the MRI, and what it revealed was a little surprising. A cystic enlargement of the pineal gland.
yes, the radiologist put down a couple of different differential diagnoses. I'm not sure how to say that.
Diagnoses.
So that was one of them. It could be a cyst. It could be a benign tumor. It could be something cancerous. He just didn't really know. And neither did the doctor that had ordered the MRI. So she decides to refer me to a very respected doctor in Fort Worth. I cannot recall.
Well, it was Dr. Lee of the Fort Worth Brain and Spine Center, and he really put some work in on it, and we have nothing but respect for the man. He was very honest when we went back for our appointment to see what we were going to do about this, to tell us that he had spent the weekend going through imaging from previous patients. And he had done thousands of surgeries
right, 30
at this
years.
point. Yeah, he had been doing it for a very long time and had never done one. He had never seen this. He was unfamiliar with it and therefore certainly not comfortable doing anything about it. And asked the first question that kind of got to us was, which cancer center do you want, UNT or MD Anderson? So we chose MD Anderson down in Houston. Kelly's from Houston, and we have family down there, and it just made sense. So off to Houston.
So we go to MD Anderson and see a neuro-oncologist there. He takes a look at the MRI and basically just says, this is pretty small. Let's watch and wait. Meanwhile, we kind of skipped over some of the symptoms that started appearing.
Well, I wanted to do a little bit of that before we get into the symptoms from my perspective, because it gets a little wild. And let me just say, if you know us personally, friend or family, stop listening. There's going to be stuff here you don't want to hear, things you don't want to know, things I wish I didn't know, because and you know, we are going to be talking about a person who is not in this room. When I think about my wife during those 3 years, we're fans of Stranger Things, and I like to think of that as Kelly from the Upside Down, because that was not my wife, not in any way was that my wife. A completely different person emerged as a result of the cystic enlargement of the pineal gland. So as I'm talking about that, I'll remind you along the way that we're talking about somebody who's not my wife. But I will also say Kelly, because that is the physical entity that was doing these things. So my first opportunity to recognize that things were going terribly wrong was I had gone to my day job is I'm chief network engineer for a large university. And I had an upgrade to do, and upgrades get done in the middle of the night so as to not disrupt operations. And I had gone up in the middle of the night, and Kelly called and told me she knew what I was doing. I was having an affair with a student, and she knew that she was up there in the data center. She knew I was in the data center because she had looked at the tracking on my phone so she could verify where I was, but she knew I was there with somebody.
And I don't remember this.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't you.
Yeah.
That was somebody else. So she calls me. She had called and said these things, and then she insists on FaceTime. So I'm holding the phone, and I'm on a time crunch to get this upgrade done. So I'm working as fast as I can, and I'm holding the phone, and she's screaming, "Who are you hiding? Let me see." And I hold the phone as far away as I can, and I step away from everything, and I turn this big circle, and I'm going up and I'm down, and I'm showing everything around me. And she's just screaming, "I know she's there. I know she's there. Baby, there's nobody here." And then she says, "Let me see it." What? Take it out. Show me. I can't drop trowel in a data center that is secured with video cameras, amongst other things. That's just not going to happen. I knew it. And she says, I'm coming there, and you just keep your whore there with you. Oh, okay, baby, you can't leave the house. You know, we got a 10-year-old there who's asleep. If he wakes up looking for us, one of us is going to have to be there. And I was wrapping things up, and I just I couldn't. So I said, I can't do this right now. I'll be there as fast as I can. And I hung up the phone. And a few minutes later, I get this text message because Kelly texted her mom. She thought, I caught Michael cheating on me tonight, but had accidentally sent the text to me. So it was, Mom, I caught Michael cheating on me tonight, but sent it to me. And I finished up what I was doing, and the work was fine, and I left, and I got home as quickly as I could. It's a 4-minute drive from there to here. And it was a surreal kind of thing, because I walked into, not only was I having an affair, I was abusing children. I was running a child sex traffic ring out of the attic of our house. And Kelly dropped the ladder down, pull the thing down, and went up into our very dangerous attic in middle of the night, screaming, "Come out, I can save you," to the children she believed that I had trapped up there. So I realized that I couldn't just yank her out of there. One or both of us were going to fall through the ceiling. All I could do was try to guide her around so that she was stepping properly and not at risk of falling. And that convinced her that I was trying to hold her back to keep her from finding these kids. That particular thing would happen 4 more times in the years that followed, and each one getting a little bit more dramatic. But this is how it all started. It started with me having an affair and running a child sex trafficking ring. And it kind of felt like, because there were certain things in the news back then about that, that those things were just sort of weaving themselves into the delusions that Kelly was having. That night, she didn't call the police on me, but that would come later. She kind of came out of it a bit. We got out of the attic. I closed things down. She apologized, and that was it for that particular night. But as this thing progressed, those incidents blurred one into another, and that became our lives for at least 2 years. So it's been 3.5 years of a journey. But there were 2 of them that were just that. The first time that Kelly realized that there was a problem.
Yeah, so I cannot remember a lot of things, but I do remember flashes, and I do remember kind of the feelings that were associated with what was going on. There was one morning where I walked into the kitchen and we had some bananas sitting on the island. And my brain knew, it's like I knew what these were supposed to be, but I also couldn't tell you what they were. I didn't know if they were food. It's like I knew that I should know, but I also had no idea what they were called. And that lasted for a couple of hours. And then I finally realized, oh, that was a banana. And, but that was scary because it was the first time that I realized that I had zero control over what was going on in my brain. So there were times I would be just standing in the kitchen, and one moment I'm having a normal conversation with our son or whoever happened to be in the kitchen, sometimes our daughters, sometimes Michael and I. And then the next moment I would not know where I was, what I was talking about, or who I was speaking to. There were a couple of times this happened, and I do remember coming sort of out of whatever occurred, which at the time we did not know, but it turned out you can have seizure-like activity with this, and that's what was happening. I was having mini seizures basically during this time, in which I would just drift off somewhere else and then come back and not know what had happened to that whole chunk of time, which I know is very scary for our son, who is only 11.
He started out as a 10. He was 10 when this all started, yeah.
Yeah.
So things slowly degraded from this point. We knew that she had the cystic enlargement of the pineal gland. We knew that they were not going to do anything about it, but we knew that we couldn't keep going this way. There were times where, we were back up in the attic. There was an incident where I had to go to a store, and when I got home, I wasn't sure where Kelly was, and I found her in our closet, and she was screaming at me just how disgusting a person I was. And she was holding a pair of panties that belonged to one of our daughters when they were little, like that had come out of a box that had just been, shoved, put away with a bunch of old stuff. And everything in our closet had been just pulled down into the floor, and she was tearing through it for evidence. She told me she was finding this evidence and not to touch her or any of this evidence because she was taking it straight to the police. And she had a suitcase open, and she was throwing everything in, calling me a lot of names, and just destroying the place. So she was safe, where she was. And so I was happy that she was there instead of in the attic. So I let her destroy the closet, tear through all this stuff, and call me the names and all. And then she wanted to drive to the police station, and I did not want her to drive. So I offered to take her to the police station, and she decided that that meant that I had the police on my side and that they were part of it. But she didn't think it was all of them, so she just called the police to come over and look at the evidence, because if the police weren't in the police station, then they would be on her side. But the police who were in the police station were part of my conspiracy. So the police showed up, and my brother-in-law, who I say brother-in-law because it's my sister's ex-husband, but he and I are still friends, happened to be one of the officers who responded. And he's had cases before with people having delusions, and was really excellent. And I just stayed outside and let Kelly take the officers inside and present the evidence. And he managed to talk to her to the point where she was okay and believed for a little while that I was not doing these things. So we hugged, and it was fine for a while. And when I say a while, I mean a couple of hours, but we had a couple of hours of reprieve from that. And then there was the infamous woman in the coat incident. I was in the front yard relaxing one evening, trying to decompress as much as I could. And Kelly comes out and says, "Where is she?" "Ooh, I saw her. I saw the woman that's out here with you." "Baby, there's nobody out here." What are you talking about?" And she said, "I saw her on the camera." "Baby, there's nobody here." She's like, "Well, come in, I'll show you." So we go inside, and it's a big TV, and there's a high def camera out front, and she puts up the footage and shows me my Gore-Tex jacket hanging over the back of the chair. Gore-Tex, my army jacket from back in my army days, was draped over the back of the chair. And she described that as a woman who was out there with me. And I said, baby, that's my jacket. And she called the kids in and showed them the woman that was out there. And they did not see a woman. They saw a jacket draped over the back of the chair. And I said, baby, you're watching the video. You were watching me outside, and then you walked outside. You were right by the front door. It took 3 seconds. So where did she go? And so she described the path that she would have taken. And so we looked at the path on the video, and nope, nothing. So the kids, they don't know. They're just like, there's a jacket. And I'm saying, baby, there's a jacket. And she would not accept it. It was definitely a woman, and we were all just missing it. I had no idea what to do with that. All I could do was to keep saying, baby, that was just my jacket. Come outside. Look, there's the jacket. Let's go look at the video and see if it still looks like a woman. And I'll just stand here, put my hand on the jacket and you go look. But no matter what, there was just no convincing her. Later, Kelly announced that she was dying at that moment, and that I was going to be so happy because I would be able to use her death to make women feel sorry for me. And she just knew that I was going to, conduct myself in that manner. And before she died, she wanted to make sure to get in a few more jabs. And so on her way out, she was just dramatically going through these lists of horrific things. Now, my oldest son died when he was 19. I am very protective of children, very protective. It's incredibly important to me. And Upside Down Kelly knew that and knows everything about me and exactly what hurts, and was able to use that to great effect to make life hell for a few years. It was incredibly difficult, and we were desperate for this to change, because when Kelly would pop out and she would be here for a short time and she was lucid and realized not what she had done or said, but she recognized from what she could see on my face how relieved I was that it was her. She could tell that, things have been bad. And during those times, we scrambled desperately for help. And then came Mayo Clinic. That's where you go when things are the craziest. And that's what we did.
Yeah. So while we're waiting for Mayo Clinic for the appointment, I don't remember ever saying this stuff, obviously, but I do remember feeling sometimes that I truly was dying. I lost so much weight to the point where I was skinnier than even my college self had been. And those that knew me in college would know that was pretty skinny. I think it down to
5'10", 116 pounds.
Yeah. And eating became a daily struggle to force myself to put enough food in to keep breathing. And there were times I remember having these seizure-like, when I would have the type that weren't psychological, that were more physical, parts of my body would seize up so badly that it felt like I was going to die. It was incredibly painful. It would mess with my heart rate. It would mess with my breathing. I would shake and tremble. And most of the time, if I wasn't already laying down, then I needed to quickly find a spot to sit down or lay down. And the worst was when it would happen if the kids had friends over. I hated that. So we finally get an appointment with Mayo Clinic, and our first appointment is a video appointment. And we had been trying for quite some time now to get any type of help. And we have this video appointment, and it's the best news ever. They already had our imaging because Michael sent them copies of it. So the neurosurgeon there, we have this video appointment, and he shows my MRI on the screen, and he draws with his little red pen on the screen, and he says, here's how I'll go in, here's how I'll take this out, here's what we're going to do, and I can help you. And those were the I can help you.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So, and what you're hearing is the sound of our miniature dachshund walking around the room and stepping on our son's sheet music that shouldn't be on the floor. So we head to Arizona. And we spend 2 weeks, the end of July and early August, in Phoenix, Arizona, and Scottsdale next door, where the temperature was all of the degrees. We're from Texas. We're accustomed to heat, but we're not accustomed to actually existing in an oven. That was brutal. So we would go and we Kelly had all kinds of testing, and one of the tests that they conducted was a lumbar puncture. And following the lumbar puncture, she had the headache that goes along with it. But then a few hours later, she had excruciating pain and felt like her arms were being ripped off. And that pain at that same level continued for 4 days. Mm-hmm. They said that everything looked fine. They did imaging on her back. Nope, there's not a problem. They wrote it off. The emergency room doctor, we went back to the Mayo Clinic's emergency room, and they're the doctors who kind of wrote this off. So eventually, one of them got the idea to do an MRI of her back for a larger area, because the way he explained it to us, and I am not a doctor and I do not know if this is accurate, and I am just repeating what was said to us, is that they look for spinal fluid collecting outside of the spine using imaging. And if they see it, then they know that you have a CSF leak. Well, they didn't see it for Kelly because it was such a dramatically bad leak that it had extended up her spine and was putting pressure on the nerves where they come out to go down your arms. That's why I felt like her arms were being ripped off. So she had this incredibly bad CSF leak for 4 days. And finally, when they realized that, they decided to do a blood patch. She got checked into the hospital one evening, and then the blood patch was to happen the next morning. She had a horrific episode that night. At one point, she stripped naked and started screaming that the doctors are in on it and they're going to kill her. And she had to get away. And so she ran out into the hall, buck naked. As I grabbed the door frame with my right hand, and grabbed her around the waist with my left and picked her up, and she was only 116 pounds. It wasn't hard. Turned around, went into the room, and yelled for the nurses, "I need help." So the nurses came running, and she's screaming at them, "I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." And the head nurse was pretty direct with her, saying, "If you don't do this, you're going against medical advice, and your insurance isn't going to pay for any of this." And somewhere down in the recesses of Kelly's brain, the part of her that is an accountant popped up and said, "Well, we're not going to do that." Her degree is in accounting. And that calmed her down enough that they were able to give her some medication. She drifted off to sleep. And the next morning, she had the blood patch.
Yes, that was the worst pain I had ever felt up in my life, and still since. And I have had brain surgery. The headaches that was experiencing, the seizures that I had, all of that, very painful. But the 4-day CSF leak, I can't even describe it. I mean, even just saying that it felt like my arms and head were being ripped off is hard. It doesn't even do it justice. It's almost like there was another gravitational force going the opposite way of gravity, as strong as you can imagine. And it was incredibly difficult just to get into the car, to go to the emergency room. And then even during that stay, before they figured out what it was, I mean, they were giving me all kinds of pain medicine, and I'm telling them nothing is helping me. This has got to be a leak. I mean, both of us were telling the doctor there, hey, I had a lumbar puncture. And then finally, I think that my neurosurgeon finally found out what was going on, because I do remember getting wheeled back and being told that I was, I guess, bumping someone out of their spot because my leak was so bad. And I still remember the whole procedure. They try to knock you out, or they put you in what's called a twilight state. But I never fell asleep. I didn't even go into the twilight state. I was talking to them the entire time. And I remember one of the anesthesiologists saying, how is she still talking to us? And I wanted to say, because this really freaking hurts. But I just, I knew that relief was coming soon. And I think within 2 hours, it was already 90% better. It was a simple blood patch. So we did all of that. And finally, I think I missed a couple of imaging appointments that were scheduled for me at the Mayo Clinic during that leak. I think I was supposed to have a CT scan of the abdomen and maybe something of the head. I'm not sure, but I believe we had to end up rescheduling those, which made our stay a couple days longer, I think, because we were already planning on being there for 2 weeks.
And they fit you in. They were really excellent. We went there late in the evening. The building was closed. They let you in a side door and did all the stuff. And those nurses who handled all that, they were there after hours. So that was pretty impressive to me.
Yeah.
And the stay was so weird because there were the usual episode things, and I by that point I was really accustomed to being accused of things. It was during that trip where Kelly realized that I was Q of the that QAnon conspiracy group thing, that's since been debunked. Anyway, she just decided that I was Q and that I was responsible for all the stuff that was happening, and I didn't even have time to keep up with that stuff. I was sort of aware of it, but politics was the least of my concerns during all this. So also we were able to fly the girls and took a whole family trip up to the Grand Canyon and had this awesome day. And then
Thanks, Amy.
and then I was accused of, well, anyway, more of the same. And then we met up with a friend of ours who is a puppeteer on Sesame Street, and Kelly was given a very, very special gift from her, and it was just this amazing night with her and her family.
Yeah.
And then it was, a few nights after that you're buck naked screaming the doctors are out to get you. So the whole trip was one of extremes. And so we have these great family photos and these horrific family memories all kind of tied together thanks to this cystic enlargement of the pineal gland. But we left there. Oh, that was our dachshund now sitting in my lap, hitting the mic. Sorry. We left there with a plan. We knew what was going to happen. We're going to come back to Texas. They were going to review it with their tumor board.
And we were going to have a surgery
scheduled
day.
and then we would head back to Arizona. So even though the trip home was miserable because it was just full effect episode the whole way, it still had this hopeful tone to it because, this horrible stuff that's happening is soon going to be over. Mm-hmm. Then we got the phone call from the doctor.
So then we get the phone call from the neuro surgeon that I had been seeing in Mayo Clinic, and we're super excited because we think we're going to have a surgery date. But unfortunately, the tumor board decided not to go ahead with the surgery. So we were pretty devastated at that. The doctor himself that had been overseeing my case, he was very apologetic. Really good doctor, but it was out of his hands. I mean, he felt that he could do the surgery. They felt it was too risky, not going to take that risk. So their suggestion to me was I needed to find a general oncologist in Texas as soon as possible.
And I had questions about that because we're talking about a known thing, right? This is what we've been dealing with. And then he tells us that the symptoms that Kelly was having cannot all be explained by this tumor. There's got to be something else going on. Find an oncologist. So we did.
So we find one at the Hughley Center for Cancer and Blood Disorders, which is about an hour and a half drive for us. And the very first visit, the oncologist that we found did a physical exam. And on the very first visit, she said, I have found a suspicious lump in your right breast. So she scheduled for a biopsy fairly immediately. I think we were back there within just a couple of days after that initial appointment. And then at that same appointment, even though I was only scheduled to have a biopsy of one side, the radiologist there, which is the way they work at this place, the radiologist actually oversees the biopsy here. So it's not just the technician, it's the radiologist with the technician. And they were doing an ultrasound on both sides and, trying to mark where they're going to do this biopsy. And as she's doing the ultrasound, she goes ahead and she does both sides and she decides there's a suspicious area on the left side. I'm going to go ahead and biopsy that as well.
So we wait and we get the news back that Kelly has breast cancer. Some of this now is putting into question what is causing what. Obviously, cancer becomes the most important thing because you can live with a cystic enlargement of a pineal gland, which is what the doctors at MD Anderson and Mayo Clinic went with. I mean, it's unlikely to itself kill you. It could be a contributing factor if you do something as a result of the chemicals that it's producing in your brain, but it is itself not lethal necessarily. Cancer is. So we shift gears, and the stress of learning that Kelly had cancer seemed to somehow make the delusions even worse, even more pronounced. And one night, I'm awakened in the middle of the night with Kelly on my side of the bed pulling stuff out from under the bed. We have some boxes under there, just the usual stuff that people have. And then throwing things off of my nightstand. The lamp goes flying, my stuff that I have my phone and my watch charging, and she grabs my watch because it has a 4-digit passcode on it that I had never changed. I had changed the passcode on my phone after an incident a few days before wherein she had looked at my phone, gone to my text messages, and looked at some messages between my brother-in-law and I, and screenshotted them all and texted them to his wife, my sister-in-law, claiming that he and I were plotting something together. The messages, when I went back and looked, because we don't text that much, were about a country music video that he was going to produce, and whether or not I wanted to be involved with it. Because one of the things that he does, he's a very creative person, is he produces country music videos. So something that's plain and ordinary was just terrible. I mean, so she's screenshot after screenshot, and she's texting them to her best friend and to her sister and to her mom, and then she's going through all my other texts to the best of her ability, and she's just screenshotting all this stuff. And there's nothing in there that I would need to hide from my wife. She's welcome to them, but there's some things in there that I didn't really want going to my mother-in-law, including some exchanges between my wife and I when she was my wife. Some of that stuff gets pretty personal, and I kind of wish that had not gone to her best friend and her sister and her mom. But this is the nature of things, and that's what happened. So this night, she knew that she couldn't get into my phone because I had changed it, but I hadn't thought about the watch. So she takes my Apple Watch, and I thought went to the living room. And then I got up. It's 3:00 in the morning, and so I'm dragging around, and I get dressed because I figure my day is going to start. I'd had a solid hour and a half of sleep. It's time to get going, and I can't find her. And I'm terrified that she might be driving. I look, our car's here, our pickup's here. She's not here. So I call her, and she says that she's left and that I have to come get her. Okay, where are you? Well, you know exactly where I am because you track everything I do, because you have control of everything. Well, actually, I don't. And you turned off Find My on your phone a long time ago because you didn't trust me to know where you were. So where are you? And this conversation lasted a couple of hours, with her telling me all along how much pain she was in because she had left the house without shoes. And so the pain is getting worse. She's getting more desperate. And I am begging her to tell me where she is, and she won't. So this time I called the police. And I said, my wife, who you're familiar with, is having a psychotic episode, and she is out there somewhere, and I need help finding her. Then she said, I'm going to throw your watch down the storm grate if you don't get here now. And I don't care about the watch, babe. Just tell me where you are, and I will come. And she wouldn't. So another hour goes by, and I get a phone call from a police officer who's there with her. And she was 1.5 miles from our house on a back road, and sitting on the curb. So I get in the car and I go and answer the officer's questions, and she hands me my watch, and we get in the car and drive home as if everything is perfectly normal. Because at this point, none of that was really all that weird, because it had just gotten to that point. I knew every night when I went to sleep, I would not wake up to my alarm the next morning. I would wake up to upside down Kelly doing something in our room or in our house or to me that was going to, add to this weird, horrific story that she was building up. And waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the woman that you love staring at you, holding handfuls of old, children's clothes or books that had come from the bookshelf in the living room, or a computer keyboard, or whatever it was that she was brandishing that night to let me know that she had found this evidence against me. It's hard to put into words what it's like for that to become normal. It's just what every night is going to be. And every day is going to be a long, exhausted journey of trying to get life done. My IT job and my voice work and kids and paying bills and all of that became this mountain to be climbed every day because there was so much else happening. It was a constant barrage of this stuff. And that certainly motivated me to keep looking for other doctors because there had to be a solution out there. And I sat at one point in our driveway having a cigar, and it's early in the day, and it's a nice weather kind of day, and I'm just breathing, just enjoying the fact that I'm alone. When Kelly comes out, tells me how disgusting I am, how horrible I am, what a sick person I am, and goes to our trash bin outside and pulls trash out, a bag of trash, and brings it over and dumps it on me and just lets me know that that's what I am and that's what I deserve. And we have a video camera out front that recorded this. And I went back after to see if I reacted the way I felt like I reacted. And I did. I barely noticed. It was just what happens. That was what life is. Okay. We had to take a little break there. Some of this stuff is pretty new to Kelly. So every once in a while we may take a break. Sorry if we're a little disjointed, but here we go. Where were we? I was covered in garbage and rolled with it and then picked it all up and bagged it back up and put it back in the trash. And that's when I was told that she had found evidence again of me hurting kids again. And this was kids' clothes that had been in a box in our closet. And I said, baby, this was in our closet and we share it. Also, we just store stuff in there. And this particular incident stands out because what she did next was, it could have been from a comedy. She takes her right arm and she draws a line and she's waving it vigorously up and down, but like in kind of a straight line. There's this side is mine and this side is yours. And these were on your side. So I didn't know how to respond to that, except I made the mistake of letting it get to me a bit and I chuckled. And that was the wrong thing to do. And I felt bad about it immediately. I wish I could take that back, but it just made things worse for that day. That was a heck of a day. Anyway, we kind of continued along with those lines. And then Kelly found this article that this woman who was a CEO and well-known in the medical community was having something very familiar happening to her.
Yeah, I had several friends that were searching online for me, and I think that someone sent me a link, not maybe directly to this article, but it got me down the rabbit hole of looking for just anybody. And as I'm reading, everything that was happening or that had happened to this woman was me, I mean, she was a CEO. She had 5 kids. We were around the same age, and she just got to the point where not only could she not keep up with her business, but she couldn't even take care of her kids, let alone, I mean, she couldn't take care of herself either. Um, Having the seizure activity and the psychological stuff, the headaches, the um, just all of it, the weight loss. And she went and saw a doctor at the Medical University of South Carolina. And at first, um, it seemed like she was also given the "we can't really help you." And then the doctor that I saw, his medical student was also, I guess, working on her case. And he asked the doctor, "Hey, I mean, this lady has tried everything. What if we went ahead and helped her surgically? Is that a possibility?"
So, to the benefit of the world, he decided that that was reasonable. This was somebody that they knew, somebody that they could tell the difference, the dramatic difference before and after. And so he got the right permissions and the right signatures and the right lawyers involved and the right everything, and did this surgery, and it worked. It started the process of ridding her of these hormones that are being secreted by this tumor or cystic enlargement of the pineal gland that causes it to create hormones, and they don't even know all the hormones. But what they do know is the hormones that are created aren't exactly like the hormones that are created elsewhere in the brain. It could be the same one, but like the bad version of it, the upside down version of that hormone. And it pumps those into your brain. And so she got the surgery and then started getting better. That's sort of the deal, is that this is this journey doesn't end at the surgery. It continues on, and eventually they're gone. But it takes time, and we'll get to that later. But that was the most hopeful thing that we had seen. And so we called immediately Dr. Patel at the Medical University of South Carolina, Musk, and got an appointment. And so we drove from Texas to South Carolina, which we had driven to Arizona as well. And so we drive over, and they do their own imaging, and we have our meeting with Dr. Patel. And he says, "I can help you." And this time, we're still a little bit leery because we had heard it before. We're so much more hopeful because he's done it successfully, notably. And at the time of that article, about 40 had been done. And at the time that we went, it was still under 200, but he had done it over and over again. And the progression after surgery was always about the same. And so we drive back to Texas, and we wait for scheduling. And as we're waiting for that to happen, we have another surgery. And Kelly has to decide whether or not to get a lumpectomy or a mastectomy, bilateral or single. And because, they had found breast cancer just on one side, but they said at her age, she should do bilateral.
Yes. So, I mean, I asked my surgeon, the oncologist surgeon that I still see today, her opinion, and she agreed that with my age, if it were her or if it were her daughter, she would recommend a double mastectomy. And so we both quickly decided that would be the best thing to do. And that surgery was scheduled for, I guess it'll be,
It was November.
it was in kind of towards the end of November um, when that happened. And of course, during this time, I still have the brain tumor going on. So a lot of that time is still kind of a blur. Um, I had the surgery, and then I guess it was probably a week after the surgery, probably a week later, the results come back, and we already knew there was going to be cancer. That was biopsy already told us that. But what was a surprise that we didn't know, the second breast on the left side that was biopsied and came back negative actually did have cancer in it. So thankfully, thank God, made the right choice. Found that out, and it was already taken care of. We had already done what we needed to do. Also, at that time, the reconstruction surgeon was in the room. It was like a double thing. So the oncologist did her thing, got the cancer, did the double mastectomy, and then he's the one that sewed me back up. And then that whole process of still having the brain tumor and then having Michael have to take care of me after that, it's a whole thing. I mean, there's like tubes and
Drain
on
pouches.
both sides of your body, and I was still kind of having like seizure-like activity, and I've got these drains that you can't, you don't want to tug on. Definitely that happened a couple of times. Yeah, I mean, he had to help. He had to drain them for me. He had to measure them, create a spreadsheet.
I created a spreadsheet. The doctor said I was the first of his patients to do a spreadsheet. So I guess I was the first
Yeah.
nerd that he'd ever had in there. But
Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
helpful, and there's no way that I could have, even if I didn't have the other stuff going on. That's a big surgery, and it is incredibly, uh, it's painful, but also it's just cumbersome because you have these plastic tubes that you don't realize until they're taking them out how much tubing is inside of you, and how much fluid is going to drain. And so I think those stayed in for a couple of weeks. So it was daily. I mean, I would wake up. The first thing that I would have to do after waking is drain them and have Michael measure them. And then you can't get that area wet, so you're basically just winging it like sponge bathing, and it's not, you can't really get dressed normally or go places because you have these giant tubes hanging off of you. So that was our Thanksgiving and Christmas, was getting through that surgery, then finding out that I did have cancer on both sides, but got that taken care of, and it looked really good. The surgeon did a great job. All the margins came back looking clean. And then started my 5 to 10 years, probably based on my age, they told me probably 10 years of taking a cancer drug that I take daily. I still take every day. So recovering from that, and then getting prepared for brain surgery, which would mean they needed me there for at least 2 weeks, I think. They needed us to stay in South Carolina for 2 weeks following, for just, making sure everything was okay afterwards. It took a couple of months to fully recover from the breast surgery. And then also, because of my age, I opted to do the reconstruction. And so that was every week, or I don't know, you might remember better.
Well, okay. So the November 2022 was the double mastectomy. Valentine's Day 2023 was the reconstruction. They started the reconstruction, but that was putting in the breast implants was Valentine's Day 2023. Then we had, because there were spacers before that, and then the implants went in on February 14th. And then we were back in South Carolina, in October. So it was interesting to me that while the tubes were in and all that stuff was happening, and Kelly's body is, working to recover, she had more periods of lucid thought during that time than at any other point in those 3 years. So although I was being a nurse and cleaning drain tubes and emptying stuff and keeping track of bodily fluids and assisting with bathing and doing all that stuff, it was a great time. I was happy to do that stuff for my wife, because my wife was back for a brief time. And so I will never look on that as a time of ew, there's stuff running out of this thing that now I got to figure out how to get off my hand. Nope. I was just happy. It was all fine. So, but then, that passed and she slipped away again. I don't pretend to understand the physiology there, why one impacted the other so much. The chemicals were certainly still being produced in her brain and bouncing around, but somehow they just didn't seem to activate things quite as frequently during that brief period of time. Okay, we're going to call that the end of part 1. We've already recorded the entire thing, but I feel like it needs to be cut in half here, and we'll pick up in the next one with more of this journey that unfortunately way too many people are having to take and nobody wants to take. Thanks, y'all.